Coming up on Man Enough.
One day, a kid invited me to eat lunch with him and started asking like what I like to do. And at that time, I had already done a couple of like guest spots on Nickelodeon. And so I told him that I act and that I had done those things. And he was like, oh, I didn't know they let cripples on that show. And I remember that was kind of the first time I really saw my limp as something to be ashamed of.
We think when we're younger, man enough means being big, strong, tall, protect the girl from the monster that comes out of the bushes, being able to lift the car off of her in case it falls down. All stuff I've never done one time.
Right.
Being man enough, what does that mean?
It's really manly to mess up, admit you're wrong, and then grow.
I couldn't accept that I was evil. So maybe I'm broken, but those broken things could be corrected.
Intimacy between a father and a son is me just wanting to like put my head in your lap.
I love you, son.
You haven't called me benevolent sexist, but my experience is women are better.
Even if it's a positive, it's still not equality.
I don't blame men for that. I just blame the system.
This is
Man enough.
Hey, Liz.
Hey, Jamie. Welcome to Man Enough.
I'm glad to be back with you and us talking about what we love to do and what inspires us in our work, in our spiritual and personal lives. I was really honored that we did the episode with my wife. And
I love that. So powerful.
And it's been really incredible to just see what's come from that. And iterating and I'm always inspired, but even more inspired to continue doing the work that we do and to reach hearts. And today we get a chance to do that even more, don't we?
Yes. Jordan Ross is joining us today on set, in quotation marks, because we're all in different locations. Isn't technology amazing? Jordan Ross, we're really, really excited to have him on. We've been trying to get him on for a long time. He's an actor and disability rights activist with cerebral palsy from Arlington, Texas. He's most known for his role in Dallas Jenkins' The Chosen. He's also a podcast host like ourselves. He is highlighting his battle, accepting and embracing his differences and helping others do the same. The podcast is called What's Your Limp? I love the name. I listened to a bunch of episodes this morning. It's really, really a great podcast. And the whole idea, we're going to go deep into this, but like, what's your limp? Meaning like, what's your the flaw that society has decided, is your downfall, and how are you embracing it and using it as your superpower? So we're so excited to have you. Welcome, Jordan, to Men Enough.
Hey, Jordan.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be here.
Yeah, I feel like we have so much synergy and alignment with the kinds of things that we care about. And you just have a really powerful story.
We normally start our podcast with asking like a personal question. Like, when is the last time that you didn't feel enough?
Right. It's tricky because, I think all the time, that there are moments throughout the day or throughout my week where that doubt creeps in or those insecurities creep in. I'm on set, not right now, but I'm about to go to set where, some of my castmates and good friends this off season and between seasons have gotten incredibly ripped and they've been working out like crazy. And I find that kind of creeping in, like whenever I'm with them, I'm like, oh man, like I should be doing that. Why am I not putting in that kind of effort? But then I have to catch myself and be like, I'm happy for them and I'm happy for that. But it's like, that's not a requirement. So yeah, there's that. And then as a father, there are times where and as a husband, where you handle a situation in a way that you wish you hadn't, or you'll get frustrated over something that you shouldn't be frustrated over. So there's all of that. But I think what I'm proud of is that I'm now at a place where I'm able to acknowledge that and realize that in the moment. And I have a lot more grace for myself than I used to in those moments.
You're listening to the Man Enough Podcast. We'll be right back.
Hey, everyone. It's Jamie Heath here from the Man Enough Podcast. Now, listen, I'm going to let you in a little secret. I love underwear. It's true. My whole day feels different if I wear the right underwear, the right socks. It's like where it all begins. We all have interesting parts of ourselves that no one gets to see, right? Kind of like undergarments. MeUndies is a celebration of what makes you who you are underneath it all.
They know comfort better than anyone, from undies and socks to bold apparel like onesies and even hoodies for your dog. MeUndies products are made with comfort and style in mind, in that order. Their website is easy to navigate, and their fun choices of patterns and colors for each product makes comfort cool. And with a MeUndies membership, you'll have access to a new pair of undies or socks each month to grow your collection. You'll also save up to 30%, that's right, 30% on each order, and get early access to special deals and new products. So to get 25% off your first order, plus free standard shipping, visit MeUndies.com/manenough. And if you're not satisfied, your purchase is on the house. That's 25% off your first order at MeUndies.com/manenough. Thank you to MeUndies for supporting the show.
All right. Welcome back to the Man Enough podcast.
I want to talk about The Chosen, this amazing character that you play. Like, this is the first time, really, that there's a character that has a limp that and that it wasn't written in the script, right? That you were disabled. Like, walk us through how you even got that role, because it's, as we know, Hollywood is still ableist. The world is still ableist. Hollywood is no different. So there's a lack of representation of disability on screen. But you've really made paved the road. So tell us about it.
Well, yeah, it was something, growing up as an actor, and especially once I went out to LA as a teenager, that's when I started to be told by casting directors to, try it without the limp, or tone the limp down, or lose the limp. Wow. And that was something
I'm sorry, can I just interrupt you? Someone would tell you to lose the limp of the very thing that you could not
Yes.
not have.
Yes.
Wow.
And it was something, I would wear a lift in my shoe, and I still do, just to be more comfortable. But it became such an issue for me internally, where every audition I went into, I felt I was more focused on not limping than I was on the actual material and servicing the story and the character. And it was detrimental to my performance. And I remember, auditions where the casting director would look down as I walked into the room, and then I was just checked out. I was like, I'm not getting this one. And, but then The Chosen came along, and I hadn't booked anything professionally in like 5 years. I had started a family. I had 2 kids and another one on the way. And I was, working at an acting school, just trying to like make ends meet. And just feeling really unfulfilled as an artist. And I always say I felt like I was given a gift and a passion for acting, but I felt like I was given a curse in my disabilities that would prevent me from ever realizing that potential. And I got this audition, and I almost declined it because I had a busy day and I hadn't booked in 5 years. So I thought this would just be more of the same. But I thankfully went to the audition and got the call back. And then I got a call a couple of weeks after that. And we shot the first 4 episodes, which I wasn't in a whole lot. And the director, Dallas Jenkins, said, "You'll be around a lot more in the next 4." Which I was. Those had already been written, and I was in those a lot more. And then in between season 1 and 2, he had asked me if I would be okay with him using my disability as part of the character. And I said yes, but I was terrified initially, because I knew that now they would be shining a spotlight on the thing that I hated most about myself. And we made it part of the story, and it's just evolved since then. And it's been the most, cathartic experience, getting to express many of my own experiences and insecurities through the character of little James, especially in a show that's it resonates with a very strong Christian audience. The relationship between faith and healing, especially in that world, is really complicated and has caused a lot of damage to people in the disabled community. The idea that you're not praying hard enough, or that you don't have enough faith, or whatever it is, or the idea that I even need healing, to be like, the only reason I have insecurities is because of how other people have made me feel. So it's been really cool kind of getting to start that conversation within that community.
Wow. I mean, I have so many follow-ups. because I think what Dallas Jenkins, the director, did is very different from probably any other director that you probably had dealt with before that, right? In the way that, first of all, that your disability was not a barrier to you getting the role. And then even asking you, like, can I make this part of your character, I think is also rare. That it's not like, assumed or again, I think non-disabled people really commodify people with disability stories. And very often those stories are for the benefit of the non-disabled viewer. They're not for the benefit of the disabled person's story and experience. And so I'm curious, though, because it sounds like it was this really powerful experience for you to spotlight it and to fully embrace it. And so what was what did it change in your real life, right? Not the pretend life that you were playing on screen to fully love yourself in that way?
I mean, it changed so much. I had never really been very vocal, especially publicly, about my insecurities and how I truly felt about myself. Still to this day, even I'll walk past a mirror or a reflective surface and I kind of cringe seeing myself walk. And then I have to remind myself, like, what are you doing? Because, if I saw someone else that had the exact same walk as me, I wouldn't think twice about it. But so there's that kind of stuff that I just never really talked about. I never told anyone what I was feeling. And I'm typically a really optimistic, happy person. And I would, people just kind of assumed that I didn't have any of those struggles. But, I was suicidal as a teenager. I was getting beat up in school. I was just really depressed. And I didn't want to burden anyone else with that. I felt like it would be burdening others by talking about it. I didn't want my mom to be hurt, hearing what I was going through. But then I found by playing Little James and expressing those same doubts and the feelings of like not being good enough or not being, worthy or, strong enough or all of these things that I comparing myself to others. By doing that as Little James, it felt liberating, and it gave me the courage to do that in my personal life and to start my own podcast where I do that. And it showed me that the more I was willing to open up and talk about my struggles, it allowed other people to have the confidence to do it as well. And it created more meaningful relationships in my own life where I was able to get deeper with people. And as an actor, it's something I try to lead with now, when I'm very aggressive in my pursuit of working with, filmmakers and people that I admire. And I say, I know this is, reaching out and throwing my hat in the ring for your project, maybe a little unorthodox, but I'm just doing anything I can to give myself a leg up, pun intended. So it's something that like I address the elephant in the room now, instead of it being this thing that like people notice at whenever I'm on set or in a casting office and they aren't sure what's going on and they feel like, oh, is this going to be a liability? Like what's going on with him? Like I've been cut out of commercials because it was too noticeable and things like that. So I think the industry as a whole is shifting, but in my approach, I think it's helped people not think about it as much. And there are opportunities like in The Chosen where it can be incorporated into the story and be really powerful. But then there's other things I've done recently where, you may see my limp, but it's not even addressed. It's just people have limps, people have differences. So it's changed so many areas of my life.
Wow. Thanks for sharing all of that.
Of course.
I have a question. Is there something that comes with this as a man that you may not or haven't felt enough because the rest of the world is telling you oftentimes that you're not enough growing up, or at least at one point did?
Yeah. I think, I grew up in the South in Texas. Everyone played football and sports. And I, because of my physical disabilities, also have really bad asthma. I wasn't able to ever do that, which is kind of what led me to theater. I like to think I would have found it regardless. But that was kind of the thing that I wasn't able to do, the active stuff that the other kids were doing. So I started acting. And so that aspect of it was like, I definitely got picked on for that kind of stuff. It started, it was my first year at a public school in ninth grade. And I wasn't really, before that, I just went to like smaller private schools. And so this new school had way more kids than I had ever experienced at school. And they were very, I just couldn't find my clique. I couldn't find where I fit in. I wasn't having any luck. And then one day a kid invited me to eat lunch with him and his friends and started asking like what I like to do. And at that time I had already done a couple of like guest spots on Nickelodeon and things like that. And so I told him that I act and that I had done those things. And he was like, oh, I didn't know they let cripples on that show. And that's when I realized like, oh, he doesn't want to be my friend. He's, just picking on me. And I remember that was kind of the first time I really saw my limp as something to be ashamed of and something that is, to be embarrassed by. And then that same group would continue making fun of me in the hall or picking on me. And then it started to escalate to, my right foot kind of drags. So it's really easy to trip me. So they would put their foot under my right foot and trip me or throw their bag at it. And it just escalated. It got worse where I ended up eating lunch between the vending machines because there's a little crack there and I could be hidden and see people coming. Where masculinity comes into play, it's like one of those things. I grew up with a dad he was a Marine, a cop, a lawyer, and now he's a politician, like just these very authoritative figures. And I love my dad, but it's definitely, it was that kind of approach of like, dry it up, don't cry, like dry those tears, like that kind of thing, where I always felt shame for that. So I was experiencing all of these things, but I didn't know how to talk to anyone about it. I didn't feel like it was okay to talk to anyone about it or to cry. I had to be tough. And that was an obstacle I had to overcome as an actor. There was a scene in season 2 of The Chosen where it was the first time I had to cry on camera. And it was something that I remember sitting there on set and being like, I wanted to, I was willing, but there was just subconsciously, there was this wall, this block there that I had to just kind of push through and we got there. But and once I got there, now it's been so much easier. Like I did it and I was like, okay, cool. I'm able to do that. I figured it out.
I feel like that's a thing I hear a lot of men talk about, that it's like they haven't cried for so long. Like I remember having this ex-boyfriend that was like, the last time I cried, I was like 7 when my dad forgot me in this camping ground. And like he vividly remembered this like horrible thing happening. And he was like, I realized that crying didn't help. Like it didn't bring him back. So I never cried ever again. And then once he was able to like break it in and cry for the first time as sort of an adult, then he was able to do it. I love that story. I'm wondering if we can like really focus in on friendships, because it seems like, the flip side of bullying, is friendship, right? And sort of connection. And one of the really fascinating things that you talk about is how you would form a friendship with another boy, and then there would be a cute girl walking by, and then they would bully you in front of the girl. So it was almost like it wasn't natural, right? It wasn't, because I think there's this perception that like, of course boys are going to bully. Of course boys are more vicious, but they were vicious as a performance of masculinity in order to impress the girls, which I don't even think girls, I mean, I was not impressed by bullying. I definitely, don't think it helped them in any respect. But can you speak about that? Because I think that's a really sort of interesting example, and also heartbreaking example of the way that it shows up.
Yeah, it was, eventually I did make friends in school, and it was the football players. And they would still bully me, but it was like in a big brother type of way. They still crossed some lines, but it was, I had protection at that point, from the other bullies. So it was bearable bullying. But I became friends with the football players. That's
interesting that you became friends with the football players. That you wouldn't expect, right? But
exactly.
Maybe their masculinity, they felt so, already at the top of the food chain that they could, I don't know. Did you ever think about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I'm not sure. I'm not sure why, they befriended me. I haven't really thought about the psychology behind it as much, but they were like, there was a few that like one-on-one, it was great and we'd make each other laugh. But then in a group, even without girls around, if it was just the guys, it would get back to like, there was, other kids in school. Like if there was a girl that had a physical disability or was in a wheelchair, they would be like, oh, there's your girlfriend, or things like that, because we both have a disability, and like things they would, make little jabs. But then especially if there was a girl that they liked that came up, they would really, it was like this weird switch where they would feel the need to pick on me in front of them. Since it was hard for me to be emotional, especially in front of men, I would seek out these friendships with women, and it was something that they were much more willing to listen and to look past what I perceived as flaws. But yeah, it was an interesting dynamic. The need that a lot of the guys had to make fun in front of girls.
Even you said in front of girls, or even when they're in front of other boys. It seems like it's a performance there as well. Would they then, after doing something horrible or bullying you in front of the girl, then they would be nice to you afterwards? Or like, that must have been confusing too, the back and forth. You never know what you're going to get.
Yeah. And there was never, any addressing it or anything. And I'm a very non-confrontational person. So I never, brought it up or anything like that either. So they would make fun. And then right after they'd be like, hey, you want to go, to Whataburger? And it was, just back to normal. So it was something that, people say like, oh yeah, guys will fight and then get over it really quick. But it's like, no, I think they just push it down and bury it. They don't talk about it. They don't talk about the conflict. That it took me a while to, and I struggle with that. If I ever have, my feelings hurt over something, or feel like something needs to be addressed, it's something that, it's hard for me to do that. Even in my marriage, there are times where like I'll have my feelings hurt by the wording of something that my wife says, and then I'll just try to hide it or push it down, and then later on I'm like, okay, I'm over it. We're not going to talk about it. But then it'll come up in like an argument a week later. I'm like, I should have brought it up then.
How long have you been married?
Let's see, this will be 9 years this year.
9. I'm in my 9th year.
Oh, wow. Congrats.
You had mentioned earlier, you used the term disability when referring to yourself. Is that a comfortable term to be used? I know for everyone it's different, but from your perspective, that's a respectful term?
Yeah, for myself, it doesn't bother me. Often if I have someone on my podcast, if they have some physical malady, I will sometimes refer as like differently abled, just to be safe. I know that there are some people that prefer that, but with me, it's something that it doesn't bother me. I can do pretty much anything that anyone else can do. It just looks a little different. I can't bend my back hardly. I have a metal rod going almost down my entire spine. And then I've metal in my right hip. So I have very limited flexibility on my hip and back. I can't tie my right shoe. So I have to have, like, if I'm out in public with a friend or my wife, I have to have them tie my shoe for me. So I just look like, this jerk that's making people tie my shoe. But I consider that, part of having a disability. So it doesn't bother me, that terminology, but I try to be aware when talking to other people.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. And I think it's about not using those words as negatives, right? Like saying like, this is disabling or crippling, right?
Right.
Like, yeah. And even not just a person, but we'll say like this, tax system is crippling corporations. Like even that is actually like
oh my God, that's so hard for me to wrap my head around. I appreciate it. Those are things.
No, I mean, again, it's like, there's so many, we've done this with so many words, right? That now would be unthinkable to use. And so I think these adjustments are really normal. And that's why these conversations are really important. I'm curious. I know you're married. And I feel like we have so many married people, but for our single viewers and potentially, single male disabled viewers, what is it like dating with a disability? Because I know a lot of my friends, collect horror stories of, when do you share your disability? They've, on dating apps and whatnot now, it happened to a friend of mine recently where she didn't say it because, whatever, and then shows up and then, the guy left after 2 minutes. And it was just like, sort of the way you describe some of these auditions where, you're about to be, rejected, right off the bat.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, and particularly I think with, masculinity, being disabled, as a woman and dating men is almost easier than being disabled, man and dating women, because being disabled, can be more aligned with the ideals of femininity, of needing help and just like being supported, right? And for men, being supported and being helped and asking for directions, right? We know that those are big transgressions. So I'm just curious, what was it like for you? And do you have any advice for our viewers who are going in the lion's den and dating in 2023?
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been with my wife since I was 20. So most of the dating I did was as a teenager.
Wow.
But it was, and even then it was like, I wasn't someone, I didn't date a ton. I had a few girlfriends and went on a few dates, but I was kind of like the friend. I was the guy friend of all of the girls. But with that, I found that like it was rare that I really felt self-conscious about it with girlfriends. Most of the girlfriends I had were pretty, they kind of would be defensive for me. Like if they saw someone look or, ever heard of anyone being ugly to me, like they would get kind of defensive. And, it was something that, I think I had a bigger problem with my height, honestly, when it came to dating. Cause it's like, there, especially in high school, it's like they wanted the tall, like football players, but, my limp wasn't really as much of an issue. I guess the advice I would give to anyone in the disabled community, that is wanting to date is, just be yourself. And, if someone's not going to date you because you have a limp or whatever your, specific limp is, if someone's not, interested in you because of that, then, it's their loss. And, there are people that could care less about it.
What's interesting to me is, we oftentimes as men want to be man enough, whatever the hell that even means. But a lot of times we define that and we think when we're younger, man enough means being big, strong, tall, protect the girl from the monster that comes out of the bushes, being able to lift the car off of her in case it falls down. All stuff I've never done one time.
Right.
They don't really mean anything to why we put pressure on ourselves that we're not man enough.
Yeah.
I'm not man enough because I'm not as big as Justin Baldoni. And it's easy to not feel like, I'm not man enough if you stand next to him. But based on what? Like, what does that mean? Man enough for what?
And even like, can I say something? Because I feel like I'm a tall girl, and even
woman, you can't. You're not a tall girl. You're a tall woman.
Tall, yeah. Hashtag, yeah. I just feel like tall girl is like a whole movement.
Okay.
But yes, like as a tall woman, I find that I'm open to connecting with men who are shorter, but they have like an issue with it, honestly, more than I do. I feel like I'll get comments again, like, and it's like, or our bodies wouldn't work, or, or again, I can tell they're into me, but they're like, I don't know. There's something that happens where they cancel themselves out of it. And
they feel again, emasculated or something like, that's interesting. I never had that. I think, well, one, like most girls were taller than me in high school. And even now, like I'm, 5'4", so there are, people shorter than me, but, I dated, like I went on a few dates with someone, when I was a teenager that was, close to 5'11". And there was a big height difference, but that, that had nothing to do, at least on my end, with, why it didn't continue on. So, but it is interesting. I can see how that would be difficult as a tall woman, that, some guys might feel insecure in that kind of dynamic.
Yeah, but it's also high school is such a funny thing. Like, you remember the show Pen 15 where just all of the female characters are played by adult female characters and the boys are played by teenage boys, because that's how it actually feels. Like, my first boyfriend when I was 16 had a head below me. Like, we would take the escalator and then like I would go on the low one so that for a brief moment we would be like the same height.
That's so funny.
I think it's visibility, right? Like with any of this.
Yeah.
You can't be what you can't see. And then if it's painted in a positive light, I think it creates opportunity for people to, see that for themselves.
Yeah.
I also love that you're like, my disability wasn't a big deal. Being short, that was harder. I also think that's that's so refreshing too for people to hear, right? And, earlier you talked about how embracing your disability fully meant that you connected more fully with other people, right? It's not just a better connection with yourself, but the people that you do end up surrounding yourself with, are the real ones. And it makes kind of all of that work, which I'm sure was very hard, for you to do. It's hard for, that's the kind of deep work, right? When you're like in the dark and you're like, all right, I got to build myself out and find the light. That's where, true connection is.
Yeah, exactly.
Does it bother you at all? Or is there any sensitivity? Or do you wish some version that when you have a conversation, it's not centered around your physicalness? Forgive me, I'm conscientious about saying the term, disability.
Sure.
And I ask this because I know that I have a perspective in life that's unique because of my own experience as a black man that was raised with a white mom. And yet, every conversation I have and what I have to offer, I don't want people to just be like, well, he's the black guy in the room, so let's talk about those issues. For you, is there any feeling about that other than, hey, let's talk about masculinity, and it has nothing to do with whether my leg works the same as your leg?
Before, I didn't want to talk about it. Before, I would avoid, like if someone asked me, why are you walking like that or whatever, I would tell them. But I as soon as I was asked that question, I would just feel like a pit in my stomach, because I was like, oh, they saw the thing that I am most insecure about. So I used to not like it, but now it's something that every time I do it's just kind of releasing the power that it's held over me for all of these years. And I'm like addressing my demons, and it really has helped me learn to love myself a little bit more. The only time it's weird, but even then I appreciate the opportunity to discuss it. Considering the show is in the faith realm, I will have people come up to me and want a picture. For instance, I had someone at the airport a couple months ago, a young couple. They came up and got a picture. They were all excited, and it was a great interaction. But then they said, so there's a scene in this last season where my character, who's an apostle with a disability, is told by Jesus to go out and heal people. He's been given the ability to heal. And my response is I follow him outside and I talk to him and I basically confront him. And I'm saying, you want me to heal people when you haven't healed me yet. And it's the most emotional scene I've ever done as an actor. It was, my character's talking about I'm not as good as the other ones in the group. I'm not as capable of them as them. I'm not as worthy as them. And it was a really powerful scene. And it's, kind of the message that not everyone is healed in this life, and that it's important to find the beauty in your circumstances and to use it to your advantage. And I was very proud of that scene. And most people, like a huge portion of the fan base, watched it and were seeing themselves, especially through the lenses, there's disabled Christians or people and other religions as well that were seeing themselves, and for the first time feeling like it's okay to have a disability. I don't need that. I don't need to be healed in that way. And anyway, this couple came up and asked me, how do you feel about the scene you did with Jesus? And I was like, I loved it. As someone with a disability, it meant a lot. It was therapeutic and it's helped a lot of people. And I could tell they didn't like that answer. And they were like, well, do you mind if we pray for you? And I thought they meant add me to their prayer list or something. And I was like, yeah, sure. So they both put their hands on me in the airport and started praying right there for my cerebral palsy to be taken away, and my scoliosis, which, it was one of those things where, considering, the kind of echo chamber that they live in and what they've been taught, I wasn't angry with them. I like, they haven't been exposed to these other ideas or perspectives. So I just, I told them, like, I honestly don't, I appreciate the thought. But I was like, and if you want to pray for me, pray for my career, for my family, for all of that stuff. But I was like, I don't need physical healing. And it's one of those things that, those interactions, it's not super common, but they do happen. And, it can be a little uncomfortable. I've had on multiple occasions, people putting hands on my leg or things without asking for consent and praying for me to be healed. So that's a little uncomfortable, but I still think it's a teaching opportunity.
I mean, your reaction is so compassionate and I think beyond radical compassion, where the fact that you don't feel, angry in that moment is, and that you're able to understand where they're coming from is beautiful. But I also think it's important to talk about how often this happens to disabled people. And, my friends who are in wheelchairs, right, who have more visible disabilities, not more than you, but have, more visibility and in terms of what their disability is. My friend Sid Marcos, like, she has a route to go to her grocery store to avoid certain places where she knows that there people will come up to her and pray on her and touch her and have these interactions with her. And I think that is one of the biggest things, I think we want, the audience to know and spread, which is that's just not an acceptable thing to do to anybody.
There's a understanding that you have, and forgive me if I'm wrong in this, that, for instance, my 5 and 6-year-old, they saw this guy that walked by that was 7 feet tall the other day. He was normal. They just don't normally see someone 7. And they could not stop wondering how he was 7 feet tall, because they're wondering at that time. When do we lose that curiosity? Is it 7? Is it 10? Is it 15? So I think it'll always be there. If I go to a neighborhood that no one's seen a black person, they're going to look and they're going to like, hey, what it's never seen it before. So it does talk to maybe exposure, like the more that we have exposure to all of our diversity, it would lessen those questions. But isn't some of the questions, I guess what I'm getting to, a reasonable question that if someone sees someone that they're not used to seeing, whether it be skin, height, a walk, a limp, whatever it may be, do you have is it okay for us to have compassion for the people who don't know anything other than that? And therefore the question is coming from that.
Yeah, I think that it's amazing to ask questions. I think that's how we learn, as long as your intent is to be educated and to listen. I think that I think that's great. That same curiosity. I have 3 kids myself. They're almost 8, almost 5, and my son will be 3 in a couple of weeks. And they're the same way. And it's something we get them, like children's books that there's one called Like Me that's all about kids with disabilities and differences and the way that they go through the world, but we're all the same. And, there's other books we have that just, without really drawing a ton of attention to it, we'll just have a character in the book with same-sex parents and biracial parents or a single parent household or things like that, just to show all of the different types of families, different types of relationships. And I love that. I think that now there are books and shows that show that more. And like, I remember growing up and my sister had all like white Barbies and white dolls, and like there was no diversity in them. But now my daughters have, dolls of all different skin colors and shades and different body types and different, like she has one of her favorite Barbies is a Barbie that's in a wheelchair, and things like that I think is just so cool, and it normalizes all of it. So now
I love that.
If we're out somewhere and there's someone with a disability or, you know, different color skin or a same-sex couple, that's just a human being. It's not something that, and if she does have questions, we gladly answer them. Whenever kids ask me, especially, I love it. Even if, you know, kids may word it in a way that may not be as sensitive as, you know, an adult would word it. Like, what's wrong with your leg or things like that. But it's something that I love that opportunity to educate them and teach them about a different body type.
You know, as much as, yes, like curiosity, just coming back to Jamie and I disagree about everything. So we always disagree about everything. And then there's a 10% that we really zero in on. But like, I agree that curiosity is a wonderful thing, right? And something that you want to encourage in children. But I think that those moments actually, Jamie, of like, what's wrong with her? Or like, if you see a kid staring at a person with a disability, you know, those are really important learning opportunities to teach children that like, the more different someone is, the more you want to make them feel included.
Oh, 100%.
Right?
We agree with that.
The less you want to ask them questions that, and I know you know this, but I actually think, and because we don't have any anti-ableist, you know, curriculum in our schools, that teaching doesn't happen in schools and in our education system. And so it's kind of left to the home where, again, a lot of people are not equipped and don't have the tools. We don't publish disabled writers, so we don't even have that many books and TV shows, right? And all that stuff, and it's starting. So I think it's really great that people are listening to you, Jordan, and understanding your perspective. And yeah, when your kid says something or you interact with a person with a disability, you know, thinking about what would you do if it was Jordan, you know, and this amazing person that you've been listening, you know, to for the last hour, who's multidimensional, right? And is so many things, including his disability. And so I hope that's helpful to people.
I hope so too. Asking questions and curiosity, you know, the reason I just wanted to add it on to my previous answer that, one reason it doesn't bother me and that I enjoy that is because, you know, I've asked questions on things that I didn't understand and had people educate me, and it's totally changed my perspective. I remember as a kid and as a teenager, again, growing up in the South with a parent who's a police officer, a brother's who's a police officer. It was, and also being, I may have a disability. So there are all these different levels of privilege that we have in society, but I'm still a white man. And I have privilege because of that. I may have a different level because of my disability compared to some other, like, so there's all of that. But I remember my instinct based on my own experiences was whenever there was a police shooting or something like that, an unarmed black man or things like that, it was like, oh, well, you know, from what I'm being told around me, it's like, oh, he was resisting, he was running, things like that. And my experience, I was a horrible driver. I was reckless as a kid. I did all sorts of stupid stuff and had a lot of interactions with the police. And it was never an issue. And I didn't really consider like that has a large part of that was my privilege. And then as I started to mature and get older and be more curious about it, I started to listen to what people within the Black community were expressing in regards to their own life experiences and their own perspectives. And now it's like I'm as passionate about that as any other movement. I firsthand have seen the benefits of asking questions with the intent of learning and educating yourself and putting yourself in the shoes of others. So, I wanted to say that I'm preaching that, the asking questions and stuff, because I know how impactful it can truly be.
Jordan, it's been really sweet speaking to you and hearing a little bit of your heart.
Yeah, you're amazing.
And your professionalism and what you're doing and your challenges and your victories. And congratulations on 9 years of coming up marriage and 3 children. That's definitely the most thing worth being celebrated, I think, is marriages that succeed and last, because so many are not. And oftentimes it's due to us men not showing up in ways that we could be better ourselves. Not to say that women don't have work, but we certainly do. So I appreciate you being on with us and sharing your heart. And with that, what do you think it means to be man enough?
I think what being man enough comes down to is just being present and humbling yourself, being willing to learn and grow and listen, and removing that pride that so many of us have struggled with. Just opening yourself up to being wrong sometimes, and to working on yourself. I think that is what makes not just a strong man, but a strong person.
Beautiful. I love it.
I love that. Admitting to being wrong and working on it, because you can't work on anything if you don't know what's wrong.
That's
yeah,
right.
Wonderful.
Exactly.
Jordan, this was amazing.
Right.
Really rich conversation, so many different wide-ranging topics, and intersections that I think are very, very important to this show that we were able to delve in with you. And thanks for being vulnerable, for sharing all of it. And I know people will learn a lot from it.
Thank you both so much. I really had so much fun chatting with you both.
Me as well. Thank you, Jordan Ross. I love that you walk through the world and you no longer feel uncomfortable talking about your disability, because you are an actor, a man, a husband, and a father with a disability who should be championed, and for the diversity that you offer the world. So why would we ever want to not honor, and why would you want to hide behind that? Why would Liz want to hide behind being a woman? Why would I hide about being who I am? All of us. That is so I appreciate that you have found that balance in your life, and so that so many others may find their balance as well. Brother.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I feel the same about y'all. I really appreciate you both.
Thank you, Jordan.
Bye. Enjoy. Thanks, Jordan.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us and having this time with Jordan, and Liz, for you being in the studio and I'm not there with you. If you are liking what you hear, what you've heard, and what you will continue to hear, and you like the fact that we were nominated for 2 Webbies.
2, baby.
Follow us at manenough.com/podcast and Spotify and Apple Podcasts, all the iTunes. Where do they find it?
We're on Apple TV. Let's manifest that.
Apple TV, all the spots. And if you want to see me and Liz debate more, come back to the next one. Until then, I'm Jamie Heath.
I'm Liz Plank.
And this is
Man Enough.
Man Enough.